All right. I just want to say thank you everybody for coming. My name is Annabelle Heddle, and I am the Assistant Director for the Illinois Higher Education Center. And we are thrilled to have you here today for our presentation done by Rich Lucey from the DEA. So here today, we want to give you an idea of what's going on. So we are going to have our presentation for about 50 minutes or so, and then there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. We do ask that you leave anything in the chat box, either for me to moderate, or you just hold on to them until the end, and then we will get to them. Your mic should be muted throughout all of it, but I can unmute if there are times of the presentation where Rich does decide to stop and pause. All right. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Rich Lucey, and he will get us started.
Great. Thanks, Annabelle, and good morning, everyone. And as unluck would have it, we're having a slight technological challenge this morning. For some reason, my webcam here on the DEA laptop is not cooperating. And so you don't get to see me, but you do get to hear me. And I guess that's the more important part, especially with the content that I'm about to share with you. So if you want to just in the chat box, just give a quick shout out. Let me know who's here, what school or organization you're representing. That would be great. And as Annabelle said, presentation, it's about 45 minutes or so. I'm going to talk about the dangers of fake pills and our One Pill Can Kill campaign. Talk generally about what the data are showing us in terms of drug use among college students. And then I'll wrap it up with talking about the various resources that we have here at DEA to support you in the work that you're doing. And so with that, Annabelle, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll get started. So the question that you see in front of you is a question that I'm often asked at, whether I'm doing a presentation or a keynote or staffing our exhibit somewhere. And that is, why is DEA in the prevention space? And the truth is, we've been in the prevention space for the better part of 30 years or so. Our presence in the prevention space really started about a year after Special Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena's kidnapping, torture, and murder in 1985. We recently, as you see there, passed the anniversary date of his death. And if you know Kiki's story, he was stationed in Mexico. He was on the trail of a multi-billion-dollar drug trafficking operation. And then one afternoon, he was leaving DEA's office to meet his wife, Mika, for lunch in Guadalajara. And as he left the building, he was kidnapped by, it turned out, a combination of Mexico Federal Nacional Police as well as drug traffickers. And they found Kiki's body about a month later or so. And so his kidnapping, torture, and murder is really what sounded the alarm, if you will, for really the general public and just everybody that, really put a fine point on it about how dangerous the drug trafficking trade is, and the special agents who put their lives on the line every day to enforce our drug laws. And so what came out of Kiki's death, as oftentimes happens in our field, his tragedy, his murder, is what spurred on the work in DEA around prevention and education. And so the Red Ribbon campaign, if you know the history of that, was all born out of Kiki's murder that started in high school in his hometown of Calexico, California. And, it grew from there. And so since that time, DEA has steadily increased our resources for individuals, families, schools, colleges, universities, workplaces, and other settings and stakeholders to support them and you in your efforts to prevent drug use and misuse. Annabelle, if you want to go on to the next slide. What is front and center on our minds here at DEA is the drug overdose crisis. It is a clear and present public safety, public health, national security threat, quite honestly. It is one of the greatest threats that we have faced in terms of drug threats to date. And we're doing everything that we can to keep dangerous and deadly drugs out of your community, but we do need your help. And so we need you to be educated as well about the dangers of today's drugs. And as we'll discuss, some of these drugs are so lethal that experimenting with them just one time could be deadly. The next slide, Annabelle, shows the stat of more than 107,000 drug overdose deaths over the past year. And about 2/3 of those we know involved synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, and about 1/3 of them involved psychostimulants, primarily meth. And so that's the unfortunate stat that all of us are dealing with at this time. And on the next slide, if you haven't seen visually, basically what a lethal dose of fentanyl is, here's the graphic image for you. This is approximately 2 milligrams of fentanyl that is considered to be a lethal dose. We know that fentanyl is about 50 times more potent than heroin. And the fentanyl that's driving this crisis isn't being, it's not just sold in fake pills. Dealers are mixing fentanyl with other illicit drugs to make their product go further and to increase their profits. On the next slide, we talk about our public safety alerts. And we, in fact, just issued another one the other day. So let me run the timeline for you. We don't issue public safety alerts often, but it's interesting that we have issued now 4 in about the last 6 years. The first one, about 6 years ago, was to call attention to the dangers associated with fentanyl when it was first emerging on the scene as a dangerous and deadly threat. And then our next public safety alert was in the fall of 2021. That was to warn the public about the alarming increase in the lethality and the availability of fake prescription pills that contained fentanyl and meth. And then just this past November, we issued a public safety alert, and that was to warn the public of a sharp increase nationally in the lethality of fentanyl-laced fake prescription pills. So you can see the progression here. So 6 years ago, we alerted the public about fentanyl first showing up on the scene. And then a couple of years ago, we issued the alert to warn the public about the increase in the availability of fake prescription pills and the increase in the lethality of these pills. And then last fall, we issued the alert to warn the public of the increase in the lethality, again, of these fake prescription pills. And you're going to see a chart in just a moment. Our most recent public safety alert, and if you haven't seen it, you can go online at dea.gov. And in fact, dea.gov/1pill gives you all the information about the One Pill Can Kill campaign. But this past week's public safety alert has to do with the emergence of xylazine and how that's now playing into this public safety and public health crisis. Annabelle, if you go to the next slide here, this will show you now, like I said, the increase in the percentage of tablets that are containing this lethal dose. And so our laboratory testing indicates that about 61%, roughly 6 out of every 10 fentanyl pills tested, contain a potential lethal dose of fentanyl. When we issued public safety alert prior to this one that showed 6 out of 10, it was 4 out of 10. So we are definitely not going in the right direction, right? In terms of the availability and the lethality of these fake pills. And remember, there are no regulations on these pills. Fentanyl is literally being added to other products and mixed up and pressed into pills. We've been using the analogy, if you think of mixing and baking, Somebody had one of my colleagues, our colleagues, I should say, in the field, talked about chocolate chips, making chocolate chip batter and such. And you're mixing that batter, and you can tell that the chocolate chips, you try to mix them as evenly as you can, but some cookies have more chips than others. The same is true with fake pills. There's no telling if a pill contains trace amounts, a lethal dose, or twice the lethal dose of fentanyl. We've been talking the same issue with, say, edibles when it comes to cannabis. There's no telling that, if you're purchasing gummy bear edibles, if you will, of the amount of cannabis, if you will, THC, that is in one gummy bear versus another one. So it's the same concept here. And Annabelle, if you go to the next slide, as we discussed, 2 milligrams is considered a potentially lethal dose. Today, the average dose in the pills tested at our labs is 2.4 milligrams, which is obviously over the lethal dose. And that's up from 1.6 in 2008. So again, you can see in just 4 short years, the increase in what the average fentanyl dose is in these tablets that we have seized. If you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the most common fake pills. And some of the more common ones are made to look like prescription opioids, such as oxy, hydrocodone, Xanax, stimulants like amphetamine, such as Adderall. Fake pills are widely accessible, and they're often sold on social media and e-commerce platforms, really making them available to anyone with a smartphone. That's really what it comes down to. And we know that they're being sold not only on the dark web, but also now through any of the social media platforms. And so that's become a concern, because again, what we know in prevention, it comes down to the 3 points that we're always trying to address in prevention is access, availability, and changing norms. And right now we know that fake pills are accessible and available through one of the most widely available means possible, and that's the smartphone, which so many of us carry. So for a little bit of a pop quiz, if the slide will cooperate with us, if you go to the next one, Annabelle. So here are 2 sets of photos for you of oxycodone. One set is authentic, one set is fake. You try and figure it out in your mind there. Which one do you think is the authentic one, and which one do you think is the fake oxy? And if you go to the next slide or advance it, Annabelle, the answers will appear here on the left. So it's a little counterintuitive, because people think that the authentic oxy is the bottom pair because it's so clean, it's crisper, when in fact it's not. It's the top versions that are authentic. And if you go to our website, and if you go to the next slide, Annabelle will talk about this, the website address is on there, dea.gov/1pill. That is where you can find all the information about this awareness campaign, which we launched in the fall of 2021. So in the toolbox, which you'll see on the website, you'll see all the public safety alerts that you can download, as well as the fact sheets. There are graphics that you can use, social media messaging, and such there. And so in addition to the graphic I just showed you about the authentic and fake oxy, there are also some other photos there around Xanax and some other prescription drugs that you can also see, where we've compared, here's the authentic version versus the fake version. And so here, basically you see what our goal is, driving down overdose deaths, and the various opportunities that we can take to do this. But I want to share with you, really, to me and others here at DEA and your colleagues around the country on campuses, on the next slide, Annabelle, really is, the top line message that we are trying to get across to everyone. And that is to never take medicine that was not prescribed by a licensed medical provider and dispensed through a trusted pharmacy. I do not care what audience you are talking to. It can be middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students, your colleagues, my colleagues, parents, grandparents, teachers, workplace, business owners, elected officials. That is such a universal, it is the universal message, which is to not take medicine not prescribed by a licensed medical provider and dispensed through a licensed pharmacy. So we really are, looking to all of our various stakeholders, including folks like yourselves who are working on and around college campuses to help spread that message. If you go to the next slide, Annabelle, please. So when we launched One Pill Can Kill in the fall of 2021, there were several colleges and universities around the country who, to our pleasant surprise, adopted the messaging and really ran with it. And so we've created a page on really our flagship resource for professionals working to prevent drug misuse among college students, which is campusdrugprevention.gov. And so if you go to that website /onepill, you'll see these examples I'm about to show you. And if you on your campus are doing some things specifically around education around fake pills and promoting the One Pill Can Kill messaging, let us know about it. We indicate the email address that you can send that information to. We really would like to highlight all of the different campus efforts that are happening around this particular issue. But I'm going to show you some examples, 4 different schools. So on the next slide, Auburn University, when we first launched the campaign in the fall, they basically took the press release, which included the quote from our administrator, Ann Milgram, and created some Instagram posts from their university platform. And again, this is, when we first launched it, it was talking about how fentanyl-laced products were becoming more proliferant around, the country. And so that's what Auburn University did with the IG post that they had here, that they had sent out. I also will tell you that a lot of these were student-driven, student-created, which was fantastic as well. On the next slide, from the University at Albany, you can see that they had a couple of posters and other graphics that talked about counterfeit prescription pills, fentanyl-laced cannabis. As I mentioned, we are hearing that fentanyl is being mixed in with all sorts of other drugs, including cocaine and heroin, meth, and even cannabis. These messages went out all across the University of Albany's social media platforms. They've actually also taken these graphics and enlarged them for their bus shelters on and around campus. As an alum of that school, native of Albany, New York area, I know how large the campus is and how large the off-campus is, and the bus transport is, a significant mode of transport for a lot of people. And so they've enlarged these graphics for their bus shelters, which have been great. And obviously they've got the QR codes there for people to find out how they can help and where they can get help if it's needed. On the next slide, for a little bit of the wow factor, if you will, for a visual. So the University of Central Florida worked with the Drug Free Coalition in Orange County, Florida, Orlando area. And then through some funding and collaboration between the two, they wrapped their police vehicles for the campus police force in the One Pill Can Kill graphics. And so as you might imagine, this is a pretty high visibility opportunity to promote the messaging. If you're interested in doing something like this on your campus, I can put you in touch with the people who worked on this, and they can share you like kind of the vendors and the pricing, which I understand is not that expensive, and has a fairly durable long shelf life, which is good as well. So I always like to say, when it comes to DEA, when we bring out the drug dogs and the helicopters and now, police cars like this, it really is an attention grabber, and people gravitate to these types of visual displays, and that's when the conversations can be started, right? And this is what we know, and provincially hook them in with some pretty eye-catching graphics, and then we have the conversation with them about fake pills and and the campaign about One Pill Can Kill. And then on the final slide from the University of Virginia, again, this was completely student-driven out of the Gordy Center, which is their Center for Alcohol and Other Drug Prevention there at UVA. And these were their IG posts that went out across social media, again, specifically using the messaging and such from the One Pill Can Kill website, and then redesigning it to fit and be tailored to their campus as well. So those are just some examples of what other schools are doing around One Pill Can Kill. And again, I put that offer out to you that if you're doing something specific on your campus or in your community around this for the campus community, let us know about it, because we'd love to highlight that on the website. So that's a bit about fake pills and the One Pill Can Kill campaign. Now I'm going to talk, broaden it a bit more and talk about the drug use rates that we're currently seeing among college students. And so if you go to the next slide, Annabelle. And all of these first sets of data come from the Monitoring the Future study. Hopefully you're aware of that study. It comes in two parts. Volume 1, as they call it, are the data that relates to 8th, 10th, 12th graders. That typically comes out in December of each year. And then the other volume, the other study, looks at college students as well as their peers not in college, as well as adults and then older adults. And that typically comes out in August. And so this is, one of the premier sets of data that we look at as it relates to drug use among college students. So the first slide does deal with alcohol. I have to talk about alcohol misuse among college students. It remains the drug of choice among college students, despite the fact alcohol is not within the purview of DEA as a controlled substance. Obviously, we need to mention it. And so what I want to point out for you here in this particular slide is that binge drinking that we know is 5 or more drinks in a row among college students. And then depending on the survey, sometimes there's the gender differentiation of 4 or more drinks for females. But we know that binge drinking was typically more prevalent among college students than non-college young adults over the years prior to 2020. But you can see that converged in 2020 at 24%. Not a surprise, right? We all know what happened in 2020 when schools and just about everything else, not only here in the States, but worldwide, shut down because of the pandemic. And so students were going typically back to home, whether that was, whatever environment that might have meant for them. And so we know that the drinking rates typically had gone down, and there you can definitely see that between 2019 and 2020. And then what happened in 2021 is what we supposed was going to happen, and in fact did. And that gap opened up again after a significant increase for college, but not for non-college young adults. And so that definitely is a bit of a pandemic effect when it comes to alcohol use among college students over the last couple of years. So you could actually go ahead to the next slide, Annabelle. And this is just a different representation of the 30.4%. Again, that's the 2-week prevalence of binge drinking. But it's the next slide that I want to point out, which now talks about another behavior that is certainly risky, and that's high intensity drinking, which is defined as 10 or more drinks in a row among college students. And we know that about 1 out of 10 college students are engaging in this behavior. And so that's certainly something to be concerned about. We had heard about, heavy episodic drinking, high intensity drinking. There were all different types of phrases for it just prior to the pandemic, but now we're seeing this again with this rephrasing of high intensity drinking. And again, this is double what binge drinking is defined as. We're seeing it at about 1 out of 10 college students. On the next slide, we now get into marijuana, cannabis. And so marijuana use trends show that there has been an increase over the past 10 years in what's considered current use, past 30 days. And you see there, again, these data released in 2022 are for the 2021 data. There's always that 1 year lag, if you will, in the data. But if you see in the past decade, we went from about 19.4% up to 24.2% for college students. And so on the, go ahead, 2 slides, Annabelle, if you will. This next slide, that's the current use. Right here is the daily or near daily use of marijuana. We're talking about 20 or more occasions in the past 30 days, 20 or more days in the past 30 days. And it's gone down a little bit. So, all right, these slides are a little bit of a mix of good news, bad news, right? So in 2020, it was the historic high, no pun intended, if you will, of 8% of full-time college students were engaged in daily marijuana use. And that's the highest rate it's been in the 40 years or so of this survey being administered. In 2021, we saw that go down a little over 2 percentage points. So that's good news. And, you know, we will take that good news. On the next slide is breaking this out a little bit for you by gender. So in 2021, marijuana use in the past 30 days was nearly the same for college men as it was for college women, due to somewhat stable levels of use among men and this increasing trend among women in college over the past 10 years. And so you can see for the women, the bottom line there, 10 years ago was at about 16%, and now it's at 24%. It's equaled where the men are. And as you can see, the men have had their ups and downs in terms of use since over the last 10 years, a significant jump 2018 to 19, and then a significant decrease from 20 to 21. And that's right where the 2 genders have converged. So interesting note there. The next couple of slides talk about vaping. And so if you go to the next slide for me, Annabelle, the prevalence of nicotine vaping was higher among non-college than college students over the past 30 days. But what we point out here is you see the college students, there's the darker line. And in 2018 to 2019, that's what made a lot of the news rounds with the skyrocketing use, quite honestly. It doubled from 1 year to the next and then tripled over the course of 2 years in terms of vaping nicotine among college students. But here you can see over the last couple of years that's decreased a bit among college students, and vaping is nicotine is higher among the non-college youth. On the next slide, that's nicotine. On the next slide, we're talking about vaping marijuana, and it was slightly lower among college students than the non-college young adults. Again, there's that big jump, you know, for non-college youth from 2018, 2019. We saw a significant increase, as I mentioned, between that same year. We've seen a steady decline since 2019 among the college students, so that's a win. We'll take that. So we just need to keep promoting our prevention messaging around vaping. The next slide talks about hallucinogens, and this is going to be, again, another piece of good news, if you will. In 2021, the use of hallucinogens in the past 12 months was 6.8%, and that's down from about 8.6% in 2020. That also was an historic high. And Annabelle, if you go to the next slide, you'll see this. There we go. In 2020, that rate there of past year use of hallucinogens also was historic in terms of the highest it's ever been in the past 40 plus years of this survey being administered. But now we've seen that gone down almost 2 full percentage points in just that 1 year. So that's good. The next slide talks about stimulants. And so amphetamine use without a doctor's prescription in the past 12 months was pretty similar for college and non-college youth and young adults. But here's what I like to talk about when it comes to prescription drug misuse among college students. So in the general population, the 3 classes of prescription drugs typically misused in order are opioids, sedatives, and stimulants. And yet among college students, that directly inverts. And so the class of prescription drugs typically misused among college students are in order: stimulants, sedatives, opioids. Now, we've had an opioid crisis in our country for the past decade at least, and colleges are not immune to that. Certainly, depending on the school, your data may show something different. I would say that opioid misuse, not solely an athletics issue, but that's where you might see the opportunity for misuse, right? You have sports injuries, and so from that you have pain management. Oftentimes prescription pain relievers are prescribed, and then as long as students are taking the medicine as prescribed and only for themselves, there's not the diversion issue, but then the diversion issue certainly could happen within that type of a setting. But as I focus on stimulants, that is the class of prescription drugs typically misused among college students. And why? Well, we think that one of the primary drivers is the mistaken belief that college students have that that taking a prescription stimulant non-medically is going to help them get a better grade. And we know there is absolutely no research to indicate that the non-medical use of a prescription stimulant will help you get a better grade. If you've happened to listen to any of the podcast episodes that I host for our website called Prevention Profiles Take 5, a couple of different times as my guest on the podcast, I've had Dr. Nora Volkoff, who's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Dr. Amelia Area from the University of Maryland College Park. I've long looked at this issue, and we've talked about this specifically, and yet that's exactly what they said, is there's no research to indicate that the non-medical use of a prescription stimulant is going to help you get from a C to a B or a B to an A. It's just not there. In my previous role, prior to being here at DEA, which will be now 7 years this May, I worked at SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, in the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. And in 2015, another center, the folks who administer the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, released a report that said on any given day, approximately 400 full-time college students will initiate or start the non-medical use of prescription stimulants. And in the months of April, November, and December, that number goes up to 500 full-time college students on any given day. Now, the report did not get into the causes or the whys of this, but if you think about those months that I just mentioned of April, November, December, what's happening on college campuses during that time, midterms and finals. And so I guess it should not be a surprise to any of us that work in this particular field with this particular group of people, college students, to know that that's probably why the numbers have jumped in those 3 months. Again, because students are thinking that if I've got an exam coming up, that not only will popping a prescription stimulant help me stay up longer and cram longer, but it will help me get a better grade. And so your colleagues and hopefully yourselves around the country are promoting this message and continue to promote this message. This also ties back to the One Pill Can Kill campaign, because if somebody is, a college student is taking a prescription stimulant that's not been prescribed to them, they run the risk of that pill coming from somewhere other than a licensed, a trusted pharmacy. So a student, has got an exam coming up, and their teammate or roommate or coworker says, you know what, if you want, I can get you, a stimulant. I'm not going to name any names here, but a stimulant to help you stay up longer, you be able to study, focus, and such. And that is true for those who are clinically diagnosed and prescribed a prescription stimulant. It absolutely does help them with their concentration and focus. That's not who I'm talking about here. I'm talking again about those individuals for whom this is not prescribed and they're non-medically using these stimulants. And so that person talks to someone who talks to someone who talks to someone who then gets the pill from not a trusted pharmacy. It makes its way back to the individual who's got the exam coming up. And then you get the unfortunate stories that we've been hearing far too often about over the last year, including a significant number of college students who unfortunately have died because of a fentanyl-laced fake pill. And so this is why we also are really trying to impress upon individuals that universal message that I talked about earlier. And I will just say that I put out this right out front. Sometimes we are accused of scare tactics. Myself and colleagues here know better in the community outreach and prevention support section that scare tactics do not work. We know that from 3 decades plus of prevention science. And the One Pill Can Kill campaign is not a scare tactic. It is simply educating people with facts that are scary. And that's how I differentiate it, because we have never seen a public health and drug threat that we have now seen over the last several years with fentanyl, and now with xylazine being introduced into the mix as well. The next slide, if you could, Annabelle, is touches on cocaine. And cocaine use in the past 12 months was higher among college than non-college young adults. Slightly, maybe not by much, but still. And this is something I've been hearing from folks who are working on college campuses around the country, that their data, whatever survey they're using, and there are 2 or 3 different trusted and valid and reliable ones out there, that they are seeing an increase in cocaine use among their students. It's not surprising to us here, I think, at DEA, even generally, because we know that the production of cocaine has exploded in South America, predominantly in Colombia, Peru, makes its way through Mexico, across the border into the United States. And so, again, it comes down to the availability and access, things we've talked about before with prevention. So we try to keep our eye on this data to see, in which direction this goes. So this August, when the new data comes out, we'll all be paying attention to all these different numbers that I've just shared with you to see the direction in which they go. The last data slide that I want to share with you on the next slide, Annabelle, if you could please, is around the mental health of college students. I mentioned that I previously worked at CSAP prior to my time here at DEA, and worked closely with our colleagues at the Center for Mental Health Services there, predominantly in the suicide prevention branch. And the reason I talk about the mental health of college students is because we know how closely aligned mental health is to drug use and misuse. And so these data come from the spring 2022 cohort of schools that administered the National College Health Assessment, the NCHA, which comes from the American College Health Association. And here you can just look at, in the past 30 days, almost 38% of students felt things were hopeless. Large numbers and a significant descriptor, right? Hopeless. 30% felt so sad nothing could cheer them up. More than a quarter of students felt worthless. In the last year, almost 36% of students had felt anxiety affected their academic performance. And there you see the 2 suicide numbers, both of which were increases over the previous semester, which was fall of 2021. 3% likely to attempt suicide someday, and 2.5% attempted suicide within the last 12 months. So we know there is this close alignment between mental health and substance use. And so that's why I certainly make sure to bring it up in the presentations that I do. So that's the data snapshot, and I'm going to just wrap it up with a quick overview of some of the resources that hopefully you're aware of, and if you don't, you're about to, the resources that we have available to help you in your work. So if you could, Annabelle, on the next slide. So our outreach to colleges and universities traditionally has been on 2 fronts. One, recruitment fairs, where the agents and other staff from DEA will go out to career fairs at colleges and universities and talk about a potential career at DEA. There's all different types of careers. There are about 10,000 DEA staffers worldwide. About half of those are special agents, The other half are made up of the chemists, the intelligence research specialists, the diversion investigators, and the professional staff, such as myself, who have been recruited to come work at DEA because of a specific subject matter expertise that can help complement DEA's mission. And so if you know my history, and certainly you can, Google my name and check out the bio, my entire career, 30 years plus, has been at state and federal government levels in the prevention space, preventing alcohol and drug misuse among youth and young adults, with a particular emphasis on college students. And so you've got that piece, which is the recruitment side. And then the other end of the spectrum are the enforcement actions. And yes, unfortunately, drug trafficking does happen on and around college campuses. The last couple of years, we've had some significant takedowns, as they call them, or enforcement actions. One in North Carolina, one in California, that involved members of the college community trafficking drugs. And so, through the investigative research that's done by DEA, we were able to dismantle and disrupt those trafficking organizations. So that's where we've been traditionally. But as I mentioned, I've been here now 7 years this May, and I was specifically recruited from my time at CSAP to get into that middle area, which is preventing drug use and misuse among college students. We know that the 18 to 25 age group has some of the highest rates of drug use and some of the lowest rates of seeking help. And college students make up a significant percentage of that age group. And so DEA has been filling a gap in the federal prevention landscape, if you will, with its portfolio of resources that started in 2016. When I came on board, it's not a coincidence. When I came on board, it was nice. I was given a little bit of carte blanche, not 100%. I don't think anybody ever is in their job, to come up with the ideas and the resources that our field wants and needs to support them in the work that they do. So if you go to the next slide, Annabelle, you'll see that we started small with very small wins. We, in 2016, developed 2 fact cards that were campus specific. These were to complement our general series of fact cards here at DEA, and they focused on what you should know about cannabis use among college students and prescription drug misuse among college students. This past August, we debuted our 3rd campus-specific fact card, and that focuses on impaired driving among college students. And I'll give you a little bit of a heads up that the next episode of the podcast that I host, which will drop later this month, I interviewed Jim Lang, who you may know is the director of the Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery, in addition to his role as the director of alcohol and other drug prevention initiatives at San Diego State University. And during the podcast, we get into this very issue of impaired driving among college students. So the fact cards are fairly easy to develop and produce. And so that was a very quick and easy win, if you will, as we started to build our portfolio of products. The next slide is basically our flagship resource, which is campusdrugprevention.gov. It debuted in July of 2017. Today, we have more than 70,000 subscribers to the website. At the top of the page, when you visit the website, you can sign up for email updates, and then you can indicate what types of updates you want to get that come out typically weekly, according to various categories and such. The reason we created this is because it did not exist in the field. Talking to colleagues such as yourselves and your colleagues from around the country, what they had told us that by and large what did not exist was an online one-stop resource for preventing drug use and misuse among college students. NIAAA has collegedrinkingprevention.gov. They, that's their purview. They specifically focus on alcohol misuse and underage drinking among a variety of populations, as well as alcohol misuse in the adult population. but we were looking at all of the other drugs and just general drug use. And so that's, we took basically 6 months of development and content and testing with our federal partners, as well as colleges and university representatives, to then launch the website. And just to pick out some of the highlights for you, there you can see even in the bar, there in the screenshot, there you can download all of our publications. There are also other federal agency publications, and then non-DEA publications from CADCA, from IACLEA, from NASPA, and then also some law enforcement campus safety publications as well. In the resources, we have the interactive map in the state and local section. So if you go to the map and click on your state, say for Illinois, for example, you will find who your representative is to the National Prevention Network. That's the state agency prevention director. You'll also get the contact if Illinois has a statewide initiative, which we know they do through IHEC. You'll see that information there. And then also the contact information for Illinois' DEA Demand Reduction Coordinator or Community Outreach Specialist, if they have one, which is a DEA staffer whose catchment area is Illinois, and that's just generally for all things related to community outreach and prevention support. There's an events calendar on the map that you can find out information about national, statewide, and local events that are specific to higher education and prevention. There's also an opportunity for you to submit an event for our consideration to post if you'd like to do that. There is a student center on the website. It's a small section because students are not our primary audience with the website, but we do know that college students and college-bound students visit the website often. And so we have created a section of the website just for them with some publications and resources around drug use among their peers. On the next slide is, as far as our print flagship goes, is Prevention with Purpose, and that's the strategic planning guide for preventing drug misuse among college students that we launched in January of 2020. This was another thing that we, after doing some listening tours and some forums with people around the country, did not exist. It's all anchored in the Strategic Prevention Framework, otherwise known as the SPIF. We know that's been around for the better part of a quarter century, but what did not exist was anything that aligned the SPIF with the work that goes on college campuses to prevent drug use and misuse. And so that's how this document was created. We are extremely pleased with the reception it's received in the field. We know that some people use it as a textbook. Some people, obviously, you're using it for strategically planning their efforts on campus. There are 2 versions of the guide. There's the print version. It's about 90 pages. If you want single or bulk copies of the guide, we're happy to send those to you. Just shoot me an email message and I'll get those to you. There's also the online version that's about 70 pages longer. And that's because the online version has all of the tools and the worksheets and the tips associated with each step of the SPIF that you can download and use for your individual efforts there on campus or in the community. They are fill-in forms, logic models as PDFs and such, and a lot of people use them exactly as that, fill them out online and save them to your individual computers at your home base. We are looking to do a refresh of this publication this year with the hopes of launching it again at the Strategies Conference for NASPA in January of 2024. I mentioned this came out in January of 2020. That was 2 months before any of us knew that COVID was going to have the impact that it would have on all of our work. And so that's partly what the new guide will address, will be prevention in a post-pandemic world, if you will. We also are going to beef up our section on diversity, equity, and inclusion across the SPIF. If you've had the opportunity to, in person or online, see any presentations that I've done with my friend and colleague Allison Smith from the Louisiana Board of Regents, we talk about this very issue of considering culture across the strategic prevention framework, and so we're going to make sure that that's included, as well as updating all of the data and some of the case studies or college examples that are in the guide. So that's something to be on the lookout for in January of 2024. And then on the next slide is the now 10 different supplemental resources that are offshoots of the main guide. And we've developed these as very brief supplemental resources. They're anywhere from 4 to 8 pages, depending on the audience. And it helps reframe the SPIF for that audience and talks with them about how they can get involved. And so we've got resources for faculty members, campus police and public safety, student affairs, presidents and senior administrators, engaging student-led organizations, promoting shared responsibility, considering culture, exactly what I just talked about, how you consider culture throughout the SPIF, working with community coalitions. Again, all of these are online at CDP, that's our shorthand for campusdrugprevention.gov. But if you're interested, again, in any hard copies of these, we're happy to send them out in single or bulk copies. Just send me an email, let me know. And then the last resource that I want to highlight on the next slide is our Red Ribbon Week Campus Video PSA contest. We just wrapped up the 7th annual contest when we announced the 3 winners at the NASPA Strategies Conference this past January. We've been now doing this for 7 years. We will be having an 8th annual, so be on the lookout for the save the date that we typically release in August. We do it in collaboration with the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. There are 3 prizes that we award to the winning universities. First place is $5,000 to support their local prevention efforts, in addition to a full ride, if you will, for 2 people from that campus to attend the Strategies Conference in January. Second place gets $3,000, and third place is $1,000. And so if you go to campusdrugprevention.gov/PSA contest, that's the official contest page. It's where you'll see when we're ready to launch this year's all of the official rules and how to enter. But in the meantime, it's where you can go to see all of the past 7 years winners. And that's, if you go to the last slide, here's my contact information. As I mentioned, if you're interested in receiving any of the publications in hard copy, in any amounts, let me know. We'd be happy to send them out. Or if you have questions that you think of afterward, because I know this is a lot of information to throw at you all at once, please don't hesitate to follow up with me. But we're right about at time, and I'm happy to take any questions if we have any. I've been monitoring the chat and the question box as we've been going along. Don't see anything yet, but I think we'll just take the last balance of time, a few minutes or so, to see if there's any comments and questions people have. And Annabelle, I guess I'll turn it over to you to bring us down the home stretch and any other housekeeping that you might have from IHEC.
So for those who did attend, if you will watch your emails for the next day, I have a survey that will be sent out. It will be linked with a mock form link from GoToWebinar. It'll have information, to give Rich some feedback on the survey if you would like it, and then also if you would like continuing education credits for your CPS certification, I will also ask that you insert your numbers there so that I can get you certificates. And then for anybody that did attend today, I will send out a general participation certificate as well as like proof for your portfolio or for your professional needs.
So Annabelle, I think we're good on questions or comments. I haven't seen any come in, which, again, that could be a good thing in that you saw it strictly as informational, and I did provide you the information you were hoping to get. And also, like I said, it's a lot of information to try and absorb as we go along. So feel free to follow up with me afterward. Have absolutely no problem answering those questions. And I'm seeing a couple of comments come in. Hi, you're welcome. My pleasure to provide you with this information.
Mhm. Well, if you don't have anything else, I will dismiss everybody and thank you so much for coming today. And thank you, Rich.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah, you as
And
well.
thanks to IHAC for the invitation. I appreciate it. Thanks, Annabelle.